A fungal spore, one mutation, and the world changed forever. Today, we're uncovering the chilling origins of the Cordyceps outbreak in The Last of Us. Let's begin. In the deep places of the world where sunlight filters green through canopy leaves, a fungus had existed for millions of years. Cordyceps. It grew in the soil. It waited in the shadows of tropical forests. It had always been there, patient and silent, doing what nature designed it to do. The fungus had a simple purpose. It found insects, ants mostly. It would send its spores drifting through humid air until they landed on an unlucky host. Then it would begin its work. The spore would penetrate the exoskeleton. Thin threads called hyphae would spread through the body, consuming it from within. But the fungus did something remarkable. It did not simply kill, it controlled. An infected ant would leave its colony. It would climb higher and higher up a stem or leaf until it reached a place where temperature and humidity were perfect. Then the fungus would command the ant to bite down and lock its jaws. The ant would die there, but the fungus would live. From the ant's head, a stalk would grow, a fruiting body reaching toward the sky, and from that stalk, more spores would fall, beginning the cycle again. This had happened for eons, a dance between predator and prey, played out in miniature across the forest floor. Scientists studied it. They marveled at it. They wrote papers about how cordyceps had evolved dozens of species, each one specialized for a different insect host. They noted how precise the infection was, how targeted. They said it could never jump to mammals. The biology was too different, body temperature too high, immune systems too complex. They were wrong. In the year 2013, something changed. Climate patterns had been shifting for decades. Winters grew warmer, summers longer, tropical zones expanded. Fungi that once lived only in deep jungles began appearing in new places. A research station in South America was studying crop contamination. Workers there handled soil samples daily. They wore masks, but not always. They were careful, but not careful enough. One researcher, a woman named Dr. Newman, began having headaches. She felt dizzy, confused. She took time off work, thinking it was stress or perhaps the flu. 3 days later, she attacked her husband. The official reports would later be buried. The incident was classified. But in those first few hours, doctors who examined her saw something in her blood work that made no sense. Fungal bodies, in her cerebrospinal fluid, in her brain tissue. Cordyceps had found a new host. The strain was different from any they had studied. Later analysis would show mutations in its genetic code, changes that allowed it to survive in higher temperatures, changes that let it bypass human immune responses. Some believed the mutation was natural, an inevitable result of environmental pressure and genetic drift. Others whispered about research, secret programs, labs where scientists pushed boundaries, trying to understand if cordyceps could ever threaten humans, never imagining they might create the very thing they feared. The truth was buried with the rest of the old world. What mattered was this: the fungus had adapted, and humanity had not yet noticed. The first cases appeared in warm regions: South America, Central Africa, Southeast Asia. People complained of headaches, aggression, erratic behavior. Local clinics treated them for encephalitis or rabies. Some were sedated, some were sent home. Within 48 hours, they would return, changed. A man in Jakarta bit 3 nurses before he was restrained. A woman in Sao Paulo attacked her family with a kitchen knife, moving with strange, jerky violence. The incidents were isolated at first, separate reports from separate hospitals in separate countries. There was no pattern yet, no connection made. Then travelers began to spread it. A businessman flew from Bangkok to Los Angeles with a headache and fever. By the time the plane landed, he was stumbling through the terminal. Confused and hostile security approached him. He lunged. A student returned to London from a volunteer trip in Uganda. She collapsed in the airport. Within hours, she was in a hospital, sedated and restrained, while doctors argued over her diagnosis. One by one, the cases multiplied. Social media captured the chaos first. Shaky phone videos showed people acting strangely in public spaces, running at crowds, screaming, biting. The videos were dismissed as hoaxes, performance art, publicity stunts. Then the news channels picked it up. In Jakarta, a hospital was evacuated after infected patients overwhelmed the emergency room. In Miami, police shot a man who would not stop attacking pedestrians, and the footage played on every network for days. Governments issued statements. They called it a new pathogen. A virus, they said. Something treatable, something containable. They told people to stay calm, but the infection spread faster than anyone predicted. It was not transmitted through the air in open spaces, which bought humanity some time. But a single bite was enough, a scratch, any exchange of infected bodily fluids. And the incubation period was short, hours, not days. By the time quarantine protocols were put in place, thousands were already infected, and those thousands had already encountered thousands more. Major cities became war zones overnight. In New York, the National Guard set up barricades in Manhattan. In London, the military closed the bridges. In Beijing, entire districts were sealed off with residents still inside. But it was too late. Hospitals collapsed first. Emergency rooms filled beyond capacity. Doctors and nurses, exhausted and terrified, worked until they too were bitten, until they too turned. Then came the police and military. Stretched thin, overwhelmed by the sheer numbers, they fell back to defensive positions. Some units held their ground, others broke and ran. Communication networks failed as power grids went down. Cell towers stopped working. The internet flickered and died. Families huddled in their homes, listening to the sounds outside, screaming, gunfire, the wet, clicking noises of the infected. Some tried to flee. Roads became parking lots of abandoned cars. Highways turned into killing fields. The government declared martial law. Curfews were enforced with lethal force. Anyone exhibiting symptoms was to be reported immediately. Anyone bitten was to be executed. In some places, this held. In others, it only created more chaos. The infection did not care about laws or borders or military might. It simply spread. Within 6 months, the world as it had been ceased to exist. The infection moved across continents like a wave. Asia fell first, then Europe, then the Americas. Africa and Australia followed soon after. Governments tried to coordinate responses, but without reliable communication, efforts became fragmented, isolated. Each region fought alone. Some countries attempted nuclear options, bombing their own cities to halt the spread. The fires burned for weeks, visible from space, but the infected simply moved around the destruction. By the end of the first year, 60% of the global population was dead or infected. The survivors gathered where they could. Military bases became fortresses. Prisons were repurposed as shelters. Any structure with walls and a gate became a sanctuary. The organization known as FEDRA, the Federal Disaster Response Agency, rose from the ashes of the old government. They claimed authority through force. They established quarantine zones in major cities that could still be defended. Boston, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Seattle, others. Inside these zones, FEDRA enforced brutal order, rationing, curfews, public executions for anyone who broke the rules. They justified it as necessary, as the only way humanity could survive. Life in the QZs, as they came to be called, was harsh but stable. People worked in labor details, repairing walls, burning infected corpses, growing food in rooftop gardens. Children were taught in makeshift schools. The sick were treated in clinics with dwindling medical supplies. It was not freedom, but it was survival. Outside the zones, those who refused to submit formed their own groups. The largest called themselves the Fireflies. They wore blue and white. They spoke of restoring government, of finding a cure, of taking back the world. They bombed Fedra checkpoints. They smuggled supplies in and out of QZs. They recruited those who still believed in something more than just surviving. Fedra called them terrorists. The Fireflies called Fedra fascists. The truth, as always, was somewhere in between. In the spaces beyond both Fedra and the Fireflies, humanity fractured further. Small communities formed in rural areas, farms where families worked together, towns that built walls and posted guards. They traded with each other cautiously. They shot strangers on sight. Others became hunters, raiders, groups that preyed on travelers and weaker settlements. They took what they needed by force, because that was easier than growing it or earning it. Trust became the rarest currency, and everywhere always the infected. They filled the cities that humanity had abandoned. They wandered highways and forests. They gathered in dark places, their numbers growing as the fungus spread. The fungus did not stop with infection. It continued to evolve inside each host, changing them over time. The stages were predictable, inevitable. Runners were the newly infected. Hours old, days old, they still looked human, though their eyes were bloodshot and wild. They moved with jerky, aggressive speed. They still screamed, still cried out. Some part of their human mind remained, trapped and terrified inside a body that no longer obeyed. They attacked on sight, biting, clawing, spreading the infection. They could still see, still hear. This made them dangerous in open spaces, where they would chase prey with relentless energy. But they were not the worst. Stalkers came next, 1 or 2 weeks infected. The fungus had spread through their brains, claiming more territory. Their behavior changed. They became cunning, deceptive. They hid in shadows. They moved quietly. They waited until victims came close before lunging. The fungus was learning, adapting its host's behavior to be a more efficient predator. Clickers were the infected who had survived several weeks or months. The fungus had consumed much of their brain tissue. Their vision was gone, destroyed by fungal growth that erupted from their faces in grotesque plates and stalks. But they did not need eyes. They navigated by echolocation. They made clicking sounds, rapid and sharp, that echoed off walls and objects. They built a sonic map of their surroundings, more accurate than sight in darkness. They were fast, strong, their bodies reinforced by fungal growths that acted like armor. And they were deadly. A single strike from a clicker could break bones. Their bite was instant infection. They could hear the smallest sound, a footstep, a breath, and they would come running. Bloaters were the infected who had lived for years, massive hulking figures covered entirely in thick fungal plates. The fungus had transformed them completely. They no longer resembled anything human. They moved slowly, but they were nearly indestructible. Bullets barely penetrated their armor. Fire was one of the few things that could stop them. Worse, they could tear chunks of fungal growth from their own bodies and throw them. These spore sacs would explode on impact, releasing clouds of infection. To encounter a bloater was to face a walking nightmare. In rare cases, there were other mutations. Shamblers found in humid environments were bloater variants that released caustic spores constantly. They left trails of toxic gas that burned skin and lungs. And then there were the stories, whispers of infected that had evolved beyond classification. Things that moved in ways that defied understanding. Things that coordinated with each other, as if the fungus itself was learning to think. Most dismissed these as myths, as fear making monsters out of shadows. But some who had traveled deep into infested zones swore they had seen them, and the look in their eyes suggested they were not lying. The fungus had one ultimate goal: reproduction, spread. In places where the infected gathered in great numbers, the fungus would take root in the environment itself. Thick mats of growth would cover walls and floors. Spore clouds would hang in the air, dangerous to breathe even with a mask. These were the most dangerous places in the world. The places where the infection had fully claimed the land, where humanity could not go without protection, without planning, without accepting that they might not return. 20 years passed. A generation grew up knowing only the world after. They did not remember cars on every street or lights in every window. They did not remember the internet or television or the simple luxury of safety. They knew walls. They knew ration cards. They knew the sound of gunfire and the smell of burning corpses. Inside the quarantine zones, life continued in grim routine. People woke before dawn. They reported to work assignments, building maintenance, corpse disposal, hydroponics, guard duty. Fedra soldiers patrolled the streets, enforcing curfew, checking papers, searching for contraband. Public hangings served as reminders of what happened to those who stepped out of line. But even under Fedra's control, a shadow economy thrived. Smugglers operated in the spaces between official law and survival. They moved supplies in and out of the QZs, medicine, weapons, luxuries like coffee or alcohol, even people for the right price. They used tunnels, old subway systems, maintenance corridors. They knew routes through infested zones that others would never dare attempt. It was dangerous work. Most smugglers did not live long, but for those with the skill and the nerve, it offered something no ration card could provide: freedom. Outside the zones, the world had changed completely. Nature reclaimed the cities. Vines grew over skyscrapers. Trees pushed through concrete. Deer wandered through shopping malls. Birds nested in the hollow spaces where people once worked and lived. It was beautiful in a haunting way. A world where humanity's monuments crumbled slowly back into the earth. But it was not empty. Survivor communities dotted the landscape. Some were peaceful, trading posts where travelers could rest, exchange goods, share news. They had rules, structures. They grew food and raised children and tried to hold on to some semblance of normalcy. Others were brutal. Raider camps where strength was the only law. They ambushed travelers, tortured for information, took what they wanted and killed the rest. And then there were those who simply hid. Hermits and small families living in remote cabins, in forests and mountains, far from infected and humans alike. They wanted no part of the new world's conflicts. They wanted only to be left alone. The culture of the old world faded. Stories became legends. Technology that still worked was treasured, but knowledge of how to repair it was rare and precious. Children learned to shoot before they learned to read. They learned which plants were safe to eat, how to move quietly through infested areas, how to tell the difference between the sounds different infected made. Language changed. New slang emerged. Old references meant nothing. The young could not understand the jokes or songs or idioms of the old world. History became whatever people remembered, whatever they chose to tell. Some communities kept libraries, books carefully preserved and rationed. knowledge written down so it would not be lost entirely. Others burned books for warmth and decided that the past did not matter. What mattered was the day ahead, the wall that needed reinforcing, the supplies that needed gathering, the infected that needed killing. Humanity had become smaller, harder. Each person carried scars, visible and invisible, but still they endured. There are no cities lit at night anymore. If you stood on a hill at dusk and looked out across the land, you would see darkness, vast and deep, broken only by scattered fires. Tiny points of light where humans gathered, burning fuel they could not afford to waste, just to keep the darkness back a little longer. The world belongs to the fungus now. It has done what it evolved to do. It found a host. It spread. It claimed vast territories and continues to expand, patient and relentless. In the deep places of infested zones, the growth is thick enough to walk on. Entire buildings consumed. The fungus has created something like forests of its own, strange ecosystems where infected wander like animals in their natural habitat. Humanity survives in the margins, in the spaces the fungus has not yet reached, behind walls, in small defended pockets. Some still search for a cure. The fireflies never stopped believing one could be found. They moved from lab to lab, following rumors and old research notes. They sacrificed much in pursuit of that hope. Whether they ever succeeded is a question lost to the wind. Most people do not think about cures. They think about tomorrow, about the child who needs feeding, about the wall that needs patching, about the infected that were spotted near the perimeter last night. They think about small moments of peace, a meal shared, a fire on a cold night, a song someone remembers from before. These things matter more than grand plans or distant hopes. The world has become honest in a way it never was before. There is no pretending, no hiding behind comfort or distraction. Life is hard and everyone knows it. Death is close and everyone accepts it. And in that honesty, there is a strange kind of beauty. Humans help each other, sometimes. They show kindness when they have nothing to gain from it. They protect those weaker than themselves. They teach children not just to survive, but to remember what it means to be human. Not always, not even often. But sometimes, and sometimes is enough. The fungus does not hate humanity. It does not think or feel. It simply exists, doing what nature designed it to do. It is neither evil nor good. It is simply alive. Perhaps that is the truth both sides must accept. Humanity will not reclaim the world as it was. Those cities will not be rebuilt. Those lights will not come back on. The old world is gone, buried under 20 years of growth and decay. But humans will continue, smaller, quieter, changed. They will adapt, as they always have. They will find ways to live in this new world, alongside the fungus, or in spite of it. Children will be born. They will grow up never knowing what was lost. To them, this world will simply be the world, the way things are. And perhaps, in time, that will be enough. The sun rises over a broken city. Light filters through empty windows. Vines sway in the morning breeze. Birds sing. Somewhere behind a wall, a guard changes shift. Somewhere else, a smuggler slips through a tunnel. A family shares a meal. A child asks a question about the old world and receives an answer that is half truth, half myth. Life continues. The fungus grows. And both, in their own way, endure. The world is quiet now. Not peaceful, not safe, but quiet. And in that quiet, if you listen carefully, you can hear it. The sound of something growing. The sound of something adapting. The sound of life, in all its forms, refusing to end. Even here, even now, even after everything, life continues. The story has no ending because the story is not finished. It unfolds day by day in countless small moments scattered across a reclaimed world. And somewhere in that vast darkness broken by scattered fires, someone is still holding on, still surviving, still human. For now, that is enough.